Series 2023, the first one of the year, and I'm super excited to be your host. This is a three-part series all around today's work being hybrid. So I know this topic, generally speaking, hits a lot of hearts in a lot of homes, a lot of computer screens and whatnot, uh, bringing the virtual world to the forefront and the norms and ways of working that we are all trying to get accustomed to. So today I'm super excited for our first episode to bring on our very own Michelle Anhang. She is a certified leadership and mental health coach. Hits very close to home for me because she is actually my own personal coach. So we won't get into that nitty gritty, but I brought her on because she has a wonderful perspective on the new ways of working that we have to bring forward in this hybrid environment, because we know what's been working in the past just isn't going to cut it in the hybrid world, and how we can bring our well-being to the forefront and setting boundaries at work to bring our best selves to the forefront. So without further ado, we will bring Michelle on, and here she is. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Nicole. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I gave a light touch on you and your title, but I'd love for you to give a little intro to our viewers.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, I am a certified leadership and mental health coach. And what that means is I help individuals and organizations, become better leaders through the lens of mental health, mental well-being, what's best for us. So really, it's a holistic perspective on how can we just be doing better to reduce stress, to feel better, feel more fulfilled, and be more productive at work.
Mm. And we know ever since the pandemic came around, that really brought it to the forefront for so many. Mental health is like, oh, we all have it, and yet we haven't really been talking about it.
Yeah, totally agree. And there were the people that had lived with mental health challenges or problems throughout that, we're already talking about it, but then, through the pandemic, people that had no experience started to have experiences or witness family members having experiences. And so it became, something that we can't ignore anymore if, we were wanting to. It's kind of really become at the forefront of the
Yeah,
workplace.
absolutely. And I know we'll dive into this, but what comes up for me is this blending of work and life, and mental health, stemming between both of them. And they, people say the baggage that you have at home comes to work. And it's like, well, now it's kind of all in the same place. So it's out on the table. Let's talk about it and do something about it.
I love that. It is all in the same place because yes, when work is home, there's no escaping it, or vice versa. So
Yeah.
yes, we're now learning this whole new way of being, and something I say to clients all the time, because sometimes they'll come to me and they say, well, I want to talk about only leadership, and I say, well, that's great, and we're human, and we cannot compartmentalize as much as we think we can, or we might want to. We're bringing our stuff with us wherever we go.
Yep, absolutely. And I think a great segue into what I really want to get into during our time is this idea of boundary setting. So with this blurring of the lines and blending of, work and home life, this new term, I shouldn't say new term, but a term that's been brought to light so much more from the pandemic, from the hybrid setting. Let's talk boundaries. What do you think?
Love to. Yes.
Okay. So for our viewers, how would you define boundaries, just to level the playing field here?
I define boundaries as a line in the sand, which
Mm,
defines I'm okay with this and I'm not okay with that.
I like the analogy. I wish I was better at those, but that like really connects for me. It is a line in the sand, and the sand's always
Yeah.
moving, right?
Yes.
It's not a clear
Yes.
cut line. I love that. And for me, when I think of boundaries, it's a lot easier said than done, but it's figuring out what can I say no to so I can make more space for yes and other things. And I guess a question to follow on with that is, when do you see them needed? Boundaries.
Always. Always.
Always. Yes.
Yes, I think it's important to be boundaried. I think boundaries help us define where we start and end, and where others begin and end as well. And so, yes, it helps us. It supports that personal agency, and as well where we are, willing to extend to, but again, from the place of choice.
Mm, I love that. Coming from choice and this extension. I think when boundaries are most needed is when we're overextending. And I know that hits home for me because for our people pleasers, for the perfectionists, for the high performers, boundaries are so needed because we always want to overextend. We want to show up for other people. And it's like, well, wait, how can I show up more for myself? So,
Yeah, and I love what you were pointing to, of like, usually we only notice when we've actually crossed a boundary or stepped on our own boundaries, or somebody stepping on ours. That's when it's like, oh, there's a boundary here that is
yeah.
being crossed, but we're not great at being proactive in setting those boundaries from the start,
Yeah.
until we
It's
are, of course.
right. We're learning, right? We learn as we go
We are.
to be less reactive and more proactive. So, knowing culturally, we're trying to be more proactive with this term and getting it in front of people of what are your personal limits and preferences to come to work better. Um, why do you think we're just starting to hear about it a bit more?
I think we had no choice. All of a sudden, everybody was forced to work from home under various lockdowns, and it suddenly became a sense of, I'm not at the office from 9 to 5 or whatever one's hours would be. Now it's, I'm at home and life is going on, and maybe my whole family's with me, and I still have to work and pay my bills and do all that. And so and I think a lot of it came about because we were noticing what we were doing wrong.
Mm,
And that's okay. I mean, we were put into an emergency situation. All of a sudden there's a pandemic, and we're like, what's a pandemic? And, and then it was like, okay, how do we make this happen? And so a lot of it was just slapping band-aids all over the place and figuring it out as we went along. And sometimes it's, when you're in the situation and feeling the pain of, what's being created, then it's like, okay, I can't ignore this anymore. And I think our stress levels, and burnout, and everything else that's been impacting everybody's mental health, really had it become an urgent issue that really needs to be dealt with.
yeah, no band-aid big enough, right? We got
I
to
know.
take off the band-aid and get down to the root.
Yes, yes.
Yes. And we are here to give a few tips on how to do that, right? Because we all have this struggle. I'd say most of us in this hybrid world and need for boundaries and just this blurred line of work and home, it's not going anywhere. So we've talked about this one boundaries for us to set, but there's this other element of leaders and expectations that I know is also that needs to be discussed too. So I'll open it up
Yeah.
to you. Should we dive a bit more deeper into how can we set our own boundaries, or do you want to go and pivot to the leader's role in setting
Ooh,
expectations?
can we do both?
We can't do both.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, Maybe let's start with leadership, and
Yeah.
and then we can move into how that can trickle down the corporate ladder, and to every level, how it can serve every level.
Let's do it. So I guess
Okay.
my broad question for you is, what are you seeing? Where's the challenge with leadership and the hybrid working world, with or without boundaries?
The challenge that I'm seeing is that, while the work environment has changed, the climate has changed, um, leadership's objectives, goals, all of that has not shifted
Mm,
to support the current way of being, whether it's work from home or the hybrid setting. It's kind of, okay, well, we've got this structure in place. We've got, our quarterly goals and expectations, but we're not adjusting anything to account for this different way of operating. And
mhm.
and they don't gel too well together.
Yeah, I can feel that. Yeah. Um, I it feels like there's a mindset issue here. Like, why humans don't care for change too much. However, leaders who hopefully have that growth mindset, absolutely, like things need to shift, and they'll say it, but then things fall short. What's happening under there?
Yeah, and I like the distinction that you're making, because I think the leaders who have a growth mindset, that are seeing this, that are really, you know, have their finger on the pulse around, employee well-being, are taking the steps. I
Mhm.
think it's the ones who don't hold that as a strong value, that maybe don't see the importance of it, or that it's a lower priority, are the organizations where more change is needed. Because I have been working with some organizations that I'm blown away. I'm like, can you hire me? Because I love what you offer, and you see the way that the employees are showing up, for their work, for themselves, for each other. And the energy of that is contagious. Like, you see them thriving, even, despite everything that we've been through, because leadership, it recognizes the importance, and they are prioritizing it. And then there
Mhm.
are the organizations where it's still, no, we have to focus on the bottom line, not on the people. So it's
Mhm.
it's more numbers focused than people focused, and that's where I see the employees struggling.
Or leaving. And
Or
or leaving.
or yes, yes. Yeah, in droves.
Yeah. So to me, there's this one, a need for leaders to model like what needs to be different. What else is there? Because I have a specific example,
Mhm.
semi-specific. We won't get into like the details, but
Yeah.
um, there's certain norms that we're seeing in hybrid that I'd love to get your 2 cents on. Because I think there's a leadership thing at play here. I also think, I don't know, let me just throw it out there and then you run
Yeah.
with it. So this norm of going into, whether it's Zoom, Teams, some sort of virtual communication platform. And we're seeing two different things. One, cultures where, and maybe I shouldn't say culture, but nonetheless, a team coming onto the screen, no camera. So
Mm.
it is this black abyss, no one's on screen. Or we have the teams that are on screen but fully muted. And to me, that's just, I don't want to say triggering, but it like brings up a lot for me of, those are just so many barriers, and I can go on, but what's at play here with this sort of
Mm.
norm or culture thing? What's happening?
What I'm seeing is, there's kind of this mindset of, we don't have the face-to-face connections that we had at work when we were all in the office together. So let's create that face-to-face environment on Zoom, Teams, whatever platform it is. And what I'm seeing is that now people are just inundated with meetings. It is
Mm,
one Zoom call after another. So first of all, there is Zoom fatigue. So, I understand why people are turning their cameras off when, they are in their sixth consecutive Zoom call of the day, and, there's eye strain, there's all sorts of things like that. Um, and at the same time, and the muting as well of, that's kind of, I'm just exhausted. I'm seeing that more as reactions to what's happening. But I
mm,
think it really starts with, we need to let go of that idea of, let's just throw a whole bunch of meetings on people's calendars. There are way too many. I am working with so many clients, all different levels of organizations, that are just saying, I'm in back-to-back meetings all day. I can't even get my actual work done. And a lot of it is because, where we might pass each other in the hall, or peek our head into someone's office and say, hey, so just checking in on this, suddenly it's now booked as a 30-minute meeting. And so now we don't get enough work done. We're scheduling way too many at a time. We're just feeling frustrated. We're tired. And then at the end of the day, even though we have all this face to face, we're still feeling isolated because this is not a real connection. This is
Mm-hmm.
a Zoom call with an agenda where we get on the call. We're just talking about what we need to talk about. Like, let's do business. And then, all right, see you, everybody. Got to go because I got my next call happening in 30 seconds. And so it's not actually accomplishing the objective that we were hoping. Um,
Mm-hmm. Of
Ideally,
fostering
I
that personal connection, that face to
yeah,
face. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's actually taking away from people's ability to work, and then that's adding to their stress, which then has the domino effect of, well, I was in meetings all day and I have a deadline to meet, so now I have to work extra hours, cutting into my family time to make sure my work gets done.
And bye boundaries.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'll share the from an optimist. We're
Mhm.
working with a few companies in this meeting culture shift because
Mm.
they're feeling it, they're experiencing it, and getting more intentional with the time that they're using on Zoom, Teams and so forth. Do they even need a meeting, right? Do you need a meeting, or can you, provide some other form of communication? And what's wonderful is we're doing that at a level that is trickling down to different teams, but that's not, realistic for all folks. So how can we provide leaders with what do leaders need to do different to help with this fatigue and help with this boundary issue with getting on virtual screens?
Yeah, I think, it's that old saying of like, could this just have been a memo? Did it have to be a meeting? Like, that's a good thing to go back to. So let's actually bring that back and be mindful of, like, does this have to be a meeting? And do I need to invite everybody that is in that calendar invite? Because
Yep.
that's another thing too, that we add people left, right, and center, and their presence is not necessary. But again, what I'm hearing on my end is, well, I've been invited, so I feel like my attendance is mandatory, and that I'm, slacking off, or it will be perceived as me slacking off if I don't attend.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, having that awareness of, like, who actually needs to be on this call. Can this call be recorded or transcribed that I can send it to stakeholders who don't actually have to be in the meeting, but can still get the information that's needed, or have somebody take minutes of it? But, being creative, that, and mindful of other people's time and their calendars, and, really reducing it. That's one side, but also bringing in the personal touch.
Mm,
So if we're wanting to have that connection and that's why we're having the meeting, then allow time for the connection to happen. Have a check-in with people. Bring the human side of things. Does any, sharing wins, sharing challenges. I often say to clients, team meetings, starting it out with, let's do a check-in on how everyone's doing based on weather forecasts. Is
mm,
today a sunny day? Are you feeling foggy? Is it stormy? And this gives us it could be very light and often,
mhm.
quite humorous and fun. People get quite creative with that, but it also gives us a sense of, how is my team doing? And for, leadership in particular, if somebody's saying stormy, how about following up with a check-in of, like, hey, so you mentioned stormy. Anything you want to talk about? Any way I can support you? And right there, we've got the real connection and
Yeah.
communication happening.
Yeah. You bring up a lot. My wheels are turning, let me say. One piece that you're normalizing also the the fact that we are humans and we're not always feeling great. We are not always going to give a thumbs up that we're doing our best, and normalizing, like, it's a stormy day, I'm not doing that well. Um, Getting leaders like comfortable and sharing that, so it trickles down to everyone else feeling comfortable. Like, I don't have to show up 100% if X, Y, and Z happened earlier. Like, it's okay. It's okay to not
Yes.
be okay, Um, and then secondly, when you brought up like ways to kind of bring in that personal connection, my team has quite the toolkit of conversation starters that are not work related, that really bring in who we are as people. So I'm thinking, the other day, our chief of staff asked on an all team meeting, what is one skill or talent that you have that you don't see at work. So we give everyone time to think about it, and everyone brings it. And like you said, it opens the doors up to just more conversation, to see us as people, not just professionals.
I love that. And what it brings up for me is how when we talk about those things, it's helping us remember who we are. And it also points us to areas where self-care can be increased, where we could be doing, because yeah, those things. And I do that as an icebreaker at the beginning of courses that I lead. It's just like, okay, what's your name? Where are you from? And what's one thing you like to do for fun?
Hmm.
And then, so yes, it's adding an extra dimension to like, okay, this person has a life beyond what I see on the screen.
Yeah,
And
and it should be
yeah,
assumed, right? And we
yeah,
lose sight of we were losing sight of that, but we have things outside of the day job, and
yeah,
we're allowed
yeah.
to.
Yeah. And I think we kind of lost sight of that even when we were working in person. It was very much one dimensional of you're
Oh yeah.
here and then you kind of disappear as soon as you walk out the office door, unless
Yeah.
you're communicating by email from the void. But yeah, we never think about people as actually having lives and interests and fun. And again, like talking about things like that has that opportunity of, oh, I enjoy that too. I'm going to reach out to you on Slack later and connect on that.
Mhm.
So again, yes, creating more cohesion, that a tighter group that is now feeling much more connected, and then back to that self care piece of even leadership ensuring of like, okay, and how often are you all doing that?
Yeah.
Making sure that we're actually engaging in the fun stuff, and because that's really what helps us come back to work energized, fulfilled, ready to take on the world, is we filled our own cups.
Yeah.
So, it's really important to prioritize that rather than having that be the side thing when there is time, when work's over, when we're finished all our Zoom calls.
Right. And it all starts sometimes with an easy question, right? It's just getting into this habit of getting curious about one another beyond the work that
Yeah.
you're working on.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
permission to talk about it and to do it and to be active.
Mhm.
And sometimes we're just waiting for somebody to say, "Yeah, it's okay."
That hits home. All right. And let me switch gears to another question for you. So we have
Sure.
like conversation starters, other ways to bring in the whole person at work. How about when you're on like a new team, maybe you're starting a new project? How can we, kind of going back to like boundaries, how can you set those limits or share those
Mm.
preferences with one another and feel comfortable, I guess, doing so? What does that look like?
Yeah, my favorite tool, that I share with, most leaders and especially those with newer teams is, the personal user manual,
Yes.
and I shared that with you as well. It's a great tool. You can Google it, personal user manual, and really what it does is it allows us to answer how we show up at work, what our personal preferences are, how we communicate, how we like to work, the environments, our quirks, all the stuff that
Yeah.
is helpful, and then sharing it within our team. So that I know if I say I'm working on a project with you, Nicole, and I need a quick response, I'm going to pull up your personal user manual and see, okay, how does Nicole respond the quickest? Is it through Slack? Is it through email? Is it through text or a call? Um, and then I'm going to do that. So it takes a lot of the mystery out of things, of, also understanding, okay, I'm an introvert or you're an introvert, and I like a quiet environment. I like focus times. This is the best time to reach me. This is the worst time to reach me. Like, you're not
Mhm.
going to get me in a good mood, at 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm going to be kind of checked out or cooking dinner. But really having that understanding, that clarity. Again, one of those things that can be shared even in a meeting where people can present, okay, here's me, or here's my coworker presenting other people's manuals.
Yep.
So again, creating that understanding, And in doing that, again, we're sharing, we're learning about one another. This is a great way to connect on a deeper level. Again, bringing humor in, which I don't think we have enough of
Yes.
these days. Like there's way too much stress and not enough humor. So let's lighten the load where we can in a
Yeah.
supportive way.
And just remember we're human and we all have
Yeah.
preferences. And I love what you shared. And I want to add on because there's this, I guess, step one of introspection. So before
Mm.
sharing, my personal manual, I have to get close to this and have my own answers to these questions
Yes.
of my preference of communicating and, how I like to receive feedback and all of the things. Cause I'll share that was the stumper for me. It wasn't like sharing with
Mm.
other people, but figuring out, you know, people pleaser here, high performer, perfectionist. I love to talk to that
Yeah.
audience because it hits home for me. But it's like, well, heck, I'm allowed to
Yeah.
have a preference in all of these different areas. That was the stumper. So offering that
Yes.
to our viewers is it's the easy to me. It's the easy part of sharing it with one another and having that common language. But getting to that point of, how can I stop overextending and where do I feel it the most? Like we forget to just feel that and reflect.
That's such a great point that, yeah, how can we set boundaries when we don't know what our preferences are and are not?
Yeah.
And so, yes, it is a great reflection piece too of, okay, what do I need? And a great way to highlight, okay, if these are the hours that I'm best at working and these are the hours that I'm not, well, here's a clear indicator of where I need to bookend my days.
Hmm.
And which, I think is kind of, now we're leading back into some of those tips that we were talking about for every level of the organization, and bookending our days is one tip of just creating those work hours,
Yeah.
whatever they are. And I love when I get emails from people, and I actually have the intention to add it into my signature line too, but I keep forgetting. Although now I'm going to remember to do it right after we finish up today. But where there's that little disclaimer of, my work hours may look different than yours. Please don't feel the pressure to answer or to respond to this immediately. It's like, thank you. So yeah, feel free to message me at 10 o'clock at night, because that's when my phone is off,
Hmm.
and I now feel no pressure to have to respond. I'll respond during my working hours where you might be sleeping.
Yep.
But again, it's that permission to operate in the way that feels most natural to us.
Yeah. You're triggering like a different tools that we could also use that are already at our fingertips. So one, it's the do not
Mm.
disturb function on our phones. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking to Microsoft Teams and Slack because I'm more familiar with those. There's those, I don't know, their icons or different settings to change from being active to, not
Yes.
active or away.
Yep.
And gosh, Slack makes it fun. You can add little icons to like if I'm facilitating and can't be distracted, or if I'm just really
Yeah.
in focus time,
Yeah.
utilizing what's already at our fingertips. I'm out of
Yes.
office, do
Yes.
not disturb. They're all there
And
for us.
at
We just got to use them.
100%. And I take the Slack advice even one step further. We don't need notifications or the pop-ups for every single message on every single channel. I've got mine set up that unless I am tagged in it, I'm not
Hmm.
getting, the notification will show up on my phone, but it won't show up on my laptop. And so I can go in, and I do go in throughout my day, and I can see what's going on, what the updates are, but they're not urgent. And people know that, and this is what I've communicated too. If this is something urgent for me to look at, then tag me. The
Hmm.
notification will come up and I can respond immediately. But that eliminates so much stress of like, oh, that's, I mean, first of all, it's stress, it's interrupting our flow,
Hmm.
so many things that, no, now I can go in when I can be fully present to it and respond rather than reacting because, oh no, they're waiting for an answer right away. Now I know they're not, and I can just do my check-ins.
Yeah. I've used that trick of the trade too. And it goes back to like how I see boundaries as what am I saying no to so I can say yes to others. And
Hmm.
for me, I'm saying no to not responding to the Slack message or a text message from the family because I can't be fully present and be intentional with, the full focus that you deserve in whatever the conversation is. And once you give people that two-sided, I'm sorry I didn't respond, but it's because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, wow, that is actually my preference because I do want your full attention. And if you can't give it to me when I'm messaging you, then I'll wait.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the idea of heads up too. So talking about like the text messages from family members. So the members of my family who, text me regularly all know that right now you and I are doing this talk. And so my
Yeah.
phone is on airplane mode and I'm not going to respond as quickly as I might otherwise. And also, if I'm on calls, if whatever it is, they typically know now as well. but it's one of those like, I am not, unless there's an emergency, I'm not reachable.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. It's tough when the other dynamics in your family are able to stay connected, throughout the workday, or just be able to switch their
Hmm.
gears quicker than you. But it's okay that you're not the same. That took me a long time. My brother loves to text, and he gives me, such great little tidbits throughout the day, and I feel
Yeah,
bad that I can't respond. But he's come to
yeah,
understand that the work looks a little
yeah.
bit different, and so do our brains. So anyway.
Yes, we all operate differently, and most of my clients, and you probably know also, that you can send me as much information as you want, and you will always get a cryptic response back because that's not my strength. So I'll give you whatever response I can, but that is not the best way to be communicating with me.
Yep. Oh, and another point is texting isn't everyone's preference, and there's, preferences for phone calls. I'm an audio message girl. I love a voice message
Mm,
because it also, uses so many more
yeah,
senses to like remember what you're saying. You hear
yeah,
tone, it's great. But all things preferences and boundaries, right?
you bet.
Well, I know we are getting close on time, and I have a few, call it lightning round questions to get a
Okay.
little bit closer to Michelle Anhang. Um, all right. First question for you, for our viewers. The last movie that you wept watching, and I can give you mine. I watched the new Pinocchio last weekend or the weekend before, and I bawled. I was so sad. It was such a moving movie. Disney does it to me every time, but Pinocchio's my answer. What
Oh,
about you?
it's funny. It took me a minute because those who know me well know that I never remember movies, and I have often seen movies multiple times because I forgot that I already saw it. And the last movie that comes to mind is actually the Top Gun remake.
Oh,
And yeah, yeah, that one had me sobbing because it took me back to the early days, watching the first one, and
yeah.
a lot of nostalgia. Um, and a lot of hope too, because I have a son actually who is very much interested in aviation and actually is studying it.
No kidding.
So yeah, so it brought up all these like personal feels that really had not a lot to do with the movie, but I was sitting there like having a real personal
Feeling it
moment there.
all. Yeah.
My whole life flashing before my eyes. So yeah, who knew Top Gun could have that impact?
Right? Oh my gosh. Oh. Or a wooden doll. I mean, I was sobbing for so long watching Pinocchio. Oh, so good. Okay. How about a book you're reading, or maybe a podcast that you're listening to that you're interested in sharing with the group?
So it's a book I'm listening to. Well, there's two books that I'm listening to right now. So I love personal development books, and I'm kind of toggling between two because I'm borrowing both from the audio library. And so when one has to go back, then I pick up the other and renew it. But the two are, well, first one is The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate.
Mm,
Fantastic book, although I'm only 20% in, but I love his work, particularly around mental health. And the other one is called You Are Not Alone, by Ken Duckworth, I believe. He works for the NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness.
mhm.
And it's an educational resource for people and family members, of people living with mental health challenges, all about signs, symptoms, treatments, navigating the mental health system. Uh, I'm learning so much despite all of the learning that I have done and
I've already done.
already done and continue to do and continue to teach. I have so many aha moments. So would, recommend both books to anyone who has similar interests.
I love it. I'll put it on my list. I'm already on
Mm.
Divergent Mind, which was such a key book that you shared with me. I'm only, I'd say about 20% in, and hearing, for those who don't know, it's around like and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but
Mhm.
so far it's around like the history of disorders and, disabilities and how this term has changed over, the decades, and how women haven't been to the forefront of how we have diagnosed and labeled these because it's been such a male dominant space. And here we
Yes.
are. Yeah.
Yes. And all the different ways that it shows up for, yeah, it is specifically geared for women. And yeah, all, and that was another, I mean, well, yeah, game changer for me as well. And that's why I recommend it in the sense of, again, how much I knew, um, but still learned so much more, and how many things about myself I never really thought about, little quirks that I had that I didn't attribute to my own neurodivergence.
Mhm.
And, I didn't walk away feeling that I needed diagnoses or, meds or anything from that. It was more a sense of like, okay, I can fully own my neurodivergence, without feeling any need to label it, and just say, yeah, this is the way that I operate. And, these things are going back to that personal user manual,
Yeah.
all those little things that we can be adding to that, around our quirks, whether we thrive in a quiet environment or we need that buzz of, a cafe. We're all
Mhm.
so different in that sense. And so just speaking to our individual needs, with full ownership and acceptance of it. That was my biggest takeaway.
What a great way to just bring it all together. And neurodivergence, another hot topic for another day. We hope to
Yeah.
see you again for that one. I hope to host it. I know it's a topic that's close to the both of us, but thank you so
Yes.
much, Michelle, for everything that you've shared. And I know we brought up that personal user manual a few times. For those listening, that's going to be a part of the toolkit that comes with this perspective series, so you guys can get your hands on it.
Right.
All
And
right.
thank you for having me again.
Yes. You are welcome. For who's listening, this was one episode of 3. Coming at you next Thursday is our very own chief of staff at Thoughtium, Amanda Lobo. So we're going to talk about, yes, still today's work being hybrid, but taking a more holistic approach to what we kind of touched on today with Michelle, of how we bring the whole person into work. So going beyond those conversation starters in meetings, bringing, again, just like our personal attributes and our preferences to the table. We're going to get a little closer to that, what that will look like for you all, and how Thoughtium's doing an amazing job at it. So we look forward to seeing you guys next Thursday, same time, 3 p.m. You will see me in the hot seat, and we will see you then.